Hello friends. Today I'll be talking on this topic lessons learned in COVID-19. So this talk was given to me by API, which I delivered for API Karnataka on 10th of January 2021. So it is a compilation of some of the lessons. It is more from my personal sort of a perspective, and I've tried to cover the lessons which are pertinent to healthcare workers. So that was the topic that was expected to be deliberated. So the first lesson that I learned was collective collaborative wanted inputs from domain specialists with scientific spirit led to good outcomes. So this is extremely important because if you look at the global data, so if you see our Indian performance, well, we have done significantly well, and that is a telling tale as to how collaboration helps. So I will just show you some data, which should probably be very evident as to how India has performed and how Karnataka has performed in India. So if this is the world data, as you see, as of 12th October 2020. Because after this the cases started coming down. So if you see the blue bars, they're all the number of cases at that point of time, and the orange bars are the case fatality rate. And if you see the global cases on October was 37 million, and the global CFR or case fatality rate was 2.86. And if you look at the US data, it was 7.76, and the case fatality was 2.76. And look at India. So we were close to US with regards to numbers, but the case fatality is 1.53, almost half of US. And again, this we have to give credit to the governmental policies which engaged all the domain specialists and rolled out protocols in a timely way and were seeking their regular input. And so was the case in Karnataka, where we were all part of the expert committee, and constant deliberations used to happen with us to see what revisions had to be made in the protocol. And if you look as of October in UK, they had very less cases, 606, but their case fatality was 7.07. And Italy, which took the brunt of the earlier part of a pandemic, their CFR was 10.18. And if you look at Japan, which is claimed to have done really well, their cases were very less. But even if you look at their case fatality, it was high. So some of the pundits, if they see this graph, they would argue that all these Western countries had elderly population, and that was the reason their case fatality. But that could be a defense. But we have to give credit with the limitations of our country being so huge, with a big heterogeneity in the population and different socioeconomic strata, having done well in this way, definitely the credit goes to the effective collaboration of the domain specialists that happened during this pandemic, which should be the lesson learned, and that is an important lesson that I have learned. And another important thing is within India, I think we have to salute every healthcare workers as to how they have performed. And even to India, I think our salutations have to be to the healthcare workers who are at the forefront of achieving this outcome. So if you look at the metro cities within India, you would see the curves like this as of October. So Ahmedabad had a top CFR, although the trends were coming down, followed by Mumbai, followed by Delhi, and Chennai was lower than Bangalore, but then we became better than Chennai towards the end of October. So, which again goes on to show it is a reflection of how effectively collaboration was done by our government with the healthcare specialists. When I say healthcare, we had in our expert committee domain specialists from epidemiology, from virology, from pulmonology, intensive care, internal medicine, and regular deliberations with regular inputs was taken to revise the protocol, to customize to the need for the protocol. And I'm sure this is also one of the reasons, amidst a lot of other parameters or other variables that government would have put in place. So active engagement of the domain specialists definitely would have played some role in influencing this outcome, is what the lesson we could learn. And if the Puritans think, okay, metros have done well, what about districts? So when we compare the district case fatality rate, so where in these graphs I have excluded the metro. So if you look at Maharashtra district CFR, excluding Mumbai and Pune, you see it was much higher than our Karnataka. And if you look at the Gujarat case fatality rate of the districts, excluding Ahmedabad, even that was higher than Bangalore. And as you see, Bangalore was lesser again, and Tamil Nadu was on the rise. So even with regards to districts, case fatality rate was much better in the district. So this is an important lesson for a state, for a country, or for any other country in the world, that government should engage the domain specialists, and all the decisions to battle this pandemic should be from taking vantage inputs from the domains specialists, and the policies to be rolled out after taking due inputs from them. So that would be an important lesson. So the lesson two that we learned was leveraging technology and embracing digital health. So here again, I have to say, Karnataka was at the forefront of leveraging technology and adopting digital health or telemedicine and tele-ICU. So I have to say that in entire India, Karnataka is the only state which adopted tele-ICU services to cover all the districts. And the tele-ICU services was offered by three hospitals in Bangalore across the Karnataka. This is the only state which had this model, and this definitely bore fruition and yielded good results. So the background of this is, so the corona gene has only 15 genes, but humans have 30,000 genes. And the virtual care during COVID became the norm. And it was realized that not it is not necessary that a patient has to be examined in physical sort of a sense to influence the treatment. And all this could be done virtually. And the social proximity that we talk about does not mean that we need to have a social contact. So it can be done virtually, but the proximity or the care could be delivered. And the telemedicine, which was not regularized over last 20 years, suddenly saw there was an attempt to regularize this whole telemedicine, which had not happened since last 20 years. And this telemedicine even extended to geriatric care to take care of elderly, vulnerable patients with COVID and without COVID. Telemedicine portals were used across the board by many hospitals to deliver the care to this elderly. And these tele interfaces were used extensively to deliberate upon a lot of scientific aspects, to educate, train, and impart skills to the healthcare workers. And all this happened with a faster pace and with a very low cost, and high quality help and advice could be provided with a reduced cost and a greater speed. So all this could be achieved with a telemedicine platform. So this was an article that came from the USA about adopting tele-ICU in the age of COVID. And as I said, again, I have to emphasize that Karnataka was the only state which adopted the whole tele-ICU model for all the districts. So the way it was done is the intensivists in the city, acted as a hub, and all the districts were engaged as a hub and spoke model, and a regular sort of a service was provided to enhance and influence the care and outcome of these patients. And all the protocols were rolled out through tele-ICU project that we adopted in Karnataka, and the district hospital doctors were regularly trained, and there was a regular sort of a knowledge transfer that was happening with regards to protocols and the newer aspects of COVID, which was evolving in a timely way, because there was so much of literature coming out, and it was imperative and it was a need of the hour that every doctor who is caring for the COVID had to be updated about all the evolving literature that was coming out, and the tele ICU services was utilized to train these district hospital doctors. And to that point, tele-IC was also used to train the doctors in district hospitals to understand and tweak the ventilatory modes as well, because we know intensive care is a newer specialty, and many of the district hospitals would not have a trained intensivist. So all the doctors in the district hospitals were trained with the ventilatory management and tweaking of the ventilator, and that hopefully has made significant difference in curtailing the death rates in these hospitals as well. So, and there was an increased flexibility in the way we used to tele ICU as a remote, and we used innovative ways to see, because we did not have to depend on heavy investment to deliver this care. So, with a fairly rudimentary sort of a tele interfaces that we used, and we were flexible, so we could achieve um, the intended goals that were envisaged. So if you look at the US data in this particular paper, so as of April 2020, they had They were doing tele-ICU services for 1,790 patients, and these were the different age groups of COVID patients that they were using it for. And tele-ICU could, sort of a concept could be used to tweak the modes of ventilator, and after tweaking, to evaluate the patient's response to the changes in ventilation also could be assessed by tele-ICU by using simple audiovisual aids. And the workflow pathways were redefined with the sort of a tele-ICU. So what it means is you didn't need to have many staff present next to the patient to care, because there was always a guidance from the remote monitoring to monitor these patients using various visual audio visual aids, so that the need for the increased manpower also could be lessened. And even to that effect, code leadership also has been described in tele-ICU, where even if there is a emergency crisis situation, this could be handled with tele-ICU. And as I said, it did lessen the number of manpower that may be needed to care for the patients. And the whole tele-ICU, what it facilitates is it just puts in additional expertise or experience for more diligent and vigilant care, because there are two set of separate eyes which are overseeing the ongoing care, which obviously leads to enhanced outcomes or enhanced favorable outcomes. And even the isolation, the patients who need isolation in COVID, because you lessen the manpower, so there is a reduced burden in the usage and the need for all this PPE, because you are monitoring these patients remotely. So it may not be needed that there is always a need for 1:1 nursing in this sort of a situation. And these tele-ICU services could be used for families to communicate with the patient by using audiovisual aids, and even nurses could communicate to the COVID patients using audiovisual aids, and emotional support could be provided to the patient using audiovisual aids, and even spiritual help and social help can be provided using audiovisual. I'm sure every listener of intensive care would agree that they would have used some sort of an audiovisual aids in treating the COVID patients within ICU, where a doctor, a nurse, or family would be communicating to the COVID patient in an isolation through maybe a WhatsApp platform or through a phone or through some sort of an audiovisual aid. So this is what I'm sure many of you would have used. So this sort of a usage was extended to continuously deliver care across the districts with a lot of knowledge transfer. That's what we did in Karnataka. So tele rounds, so from our hospital, we were covering 15 districts in Karnataka, and another hospital was covering 15 districts, and Bangalore, all the COVID hospitals under the care of government was covered by another hospital. So the three hospitals within Bangalore were literally covering whole of Karnataka for ICU management of these patients, were hand holding the doctors in all these districts to treat their critically unwell patients. So as I'm speaking, we are continuing to do this tele-ICU. We have done it for more than 10 months now. More than 18,000 COVID-19 patients we have monitored or we have discussed and deliberated so far. And to that effect, we have even come out with this position paper from our Karnataka. As you see, one of the author is Dr. Trilok Chandra. He's a medical doctor and he's the chief nodal officer for a whole COVID sort of a care in all the district hospitals in Karnataka, and who was overseeing the critical care services for whole of Karnataka. So he's a senior IAS officer. So he's also one of the authors. So, and these are the doctors who are the key leaders for these tele-ICU services which we were running across Karnataka. And this is a nice review article which is published in IJMS. So, to that effect, this has become a sort of a reference point for the government now, which possibly will be considering a digital command center to sustain this tele-ICU project that we have initiated during COVID. And another important thing that has evolved from the COVID is the importance of protecting the workforce. So that's another important lesson, because before COVID, there was no concept about protection of workforce as a priority in a healthcare industry. So protecting the workforce who are at a high risk has become a priority now in the post-COVID or intra-COVID situation, and the safety of these healthcare workers was not extensively discussed or deliberated, and they were kept as a low level priority. And this protection was emphasized with increasing use of this PPE and keeping the whole workforce prepared for eventual sort of a exposure to this sort of a pandemic situation. And the new normal is more emphasis on safety of these healthcare workers and providing emotional support to these healthcare workers is something that has gotten priority during this pandemic. So the third lesson that we learned from this COVID is the speed of learning and adaptability of healthcare workers. I'm sure every listener now would know how the science has so rapidly evolved and has been dynamically changing since the onset of COVID, because there have been more than 60 to 65,000 articles that have come out in just around a 1 year span on COVID itself. And for us to keep abreast of all this evolving literature, experiences, and distilling out the core essence to our practice needed enormous speed of learning. And that is something which happened in this COVID situation, which is a new lesson. And if you look at the background literature, to come out with a proven sort of a treatment or favorable innovation ordinarily took many years before. But with COVID, the average cycle time for any intervention or for any treatment that conclusively the healthcare people would agree upon was up to 17 years before. And now we saw even the speed of capacity building happened at an alarming pace. So if you look at this Nightingale Hospital, it was set up within 18 days of planning when the first patient was admitted. So this would have never happened in a pre-COVID, which means there is an ability for our human mankind to build their capacity to an extent of setting up a big hospital within a very short span of time. So this is something which is new that we have all learned. And the guidelines, which ordinarily took months to years before, in COVID time, it only took weeks to come out with a new guideline. And if you look at the Chinese people, so they've evaluated 73,000 patients in a very short span of time to come out with the risk factors of the COVID, to determine what are the risk factors in a COVID which determines the morbidity. So that was the speed at which the people used to do the research, to come out with the data, analyze the data, and come out with a change in the practice pattern. So this is something which is very new that has happened. And even you know for sure that it is with an alarming speed that the whole drug industry, the startup companies, and the universities are collaborating with each other to come out with new diagnostics. So I'm sure when we started COVID, we never knew how to diagnose, but then so many different modalities of establishing diagnosis came in a very fast pace. And even with regards to the treatment, so the drug treatment, I think there are a lot of drugs that came out in a very alarming pace, and this has been very fluidic in nature. And this also happened at an alarming speed. And now I'm sure every listener would agree about the speed in which the vaccines are being rolled out. So there is a rapidity in which the whole vaccine, the race to come out with a good vaccine is being rolled out. So these are all something very new, and these are the lessons that we have learned. And another important thing that has happened is to understand the value of standards. So this pandemic has put emphasis on following some uniform protocol. So that is an important lesson, because most of the doctors who are dealing with COVID were looking forward to getting a protocol and adhering to the protocol, and they didn't want to deviate from the protocol that comes from a recognized body, which would be a government policy or which would be a state sort of a policy. So they did not want to really deviate from that guideline. And there were ethical dilemmas also, which was something new. And the new sort of a normal was to stick to the standard operating procedures, which was the norm, because government used to come out with a regular SOPs as to how we quarantine these patients and how we try to allocate the beds for these patients, how we treat these patients. So every healthcare personnel was looking up to these SOPs that was being rolled out, which was not the case prior. So that's a lesson. And another strangeness of this whole COVID is it led to propping up of a new generation called experts. So there were experts from epidemiology, there were experts from virology, there were experts from the clinical standpoint, and these experts became the voice of influencing the management, and they were the people who were an interface between the government and the medical community to see what is best for the patients to save lives. So this is something which was again new. And the value of standards between 11th March to 11th April, the National Academy of Science Standing Committee came up with 11 formal rapid expeditive consultation documents. So what it only means to say is within a month's time, there were, this was the speed and alacrity at which the policies and protocols were rolling out. So it was at an alarming speed. There was revisions and rolling out of these protocols and policies. And another new thing is with regards to COVID is there was a global interconnectedness. So which means there was sharing of information between the countries and between the continents to vanquish this pandemic or to battle this pandemic. And there was a huge knowledge transfer that was happening across the globe to try and see how best one could conquer this pandemic. And everyone was looking up to trusted authority to be influenced about the care to be given to the patients, which means no one wanted to believe in some mythical sort of a thoughts, and they were looking at a sound scientific body to guide them towards the treatment and towards the care of the patients. And many healthcare workers did not want to have a huge unscientific variation in the way they treated the patients, and they were looking for an authentic scientific body to influence the management. So that is also something which is an important thing, which means the science was given the priority and it was put at a higher pedestal to influence their management. So which is also a new thing. So the evidence-based medicine, what we say, or the core scientific aspect is what the whole community look forward to influence the care of these COVID patients. That is something new. So the lesson 4 we learned, which is a sad lesson, is inequity and distributive justice and leadership. Inequity is we saw how marginalized sections of the society took the brunt in this COVID, and how the distribution of certain resources were not equitable. So this is the sadder part of this. And what we realized during this pandemic is the public health was uh, was very much ignored over last many years, and that became a very glaring point to be witnessed by during this pandemic. So public health was eroded, and there was no readiness of the public health to tackle this pandemic at the outset. And COVID has taught some tough lessons as to how it has taken a brunt on the public health. And the inequity, if you see, the poor and underrepresented minorities took a major hit, and marginalized sections of the society took a major hit, and some of the indigenous population also took the hit. And this was even shown in the published literature that if you look at Chicago, 30% of the blacks were affected with COVID, but accounted for 68% of COVID deaths. And in Wisconsin, only 6% blacks were affected, but 50% of them died, which again shows that there was an inequitable justice or a distributive justice or inequity in the care that had happened. And the questions, even within India, we know how the migrant population suffered during the COVID. And the questions are raised in different countries about the leadership role. Because we know that India, being so diverse and so heterogeneous, with God's grace, we have done phenomenally well in comparison to very wealthy countries who are very well developed and who boast of a advanced healthcare, and we have seen how miserably they have crumbled, and that is again attributed to the leadership in some of those countries. I'm sure you would know we are talking about a country like US where leadership has possibly been an issue when they were tackling with the COVID. And the questions are raised about whether there are adequate social security nets, social, economic, and security nets that can be provided during this crisis. So this is another thing for the governance to deliberate upon. And inequity, the consumers also, the public, obviously look towards a uh, authentic scientific body to influence the care for themselves, which means they did not look into non-authentic sort of a sources to look for solutions. So that is something new. And another new lesson that we could learn was there was an increased sense of social solidarity for healthcare workers and all the frontline people, which includes police. And these were looked at as heroes during this COVID. And COVID also, because there was reduced movement of vehicular traffic, road, rail, and air traffic. So the number of road traffic accidents significantly came down during COVID. And COVID led to evolution of these virtual platforms like Zoom and other sort of a virtual platforms. And what also COVID did was it reduced the carbon print on our global, on our Earth, So Earth became more healthier because the carbon footprint was significantly reduced because of reduced carbon emissions that happened because of reduced movement of the vehicular traffic. So this is also something which was new that happened. So the lesson 5 that we learned was the surgical pathways were redefined and surgical specialties were de-emphasized during COVID, which means to say that medical specialties came more into the forefront and the routine elective surgeries took the backseat, and that is another lesson. So when I say surgical practices were redefined, the whole surgical practices changed because they needed a screening test for all the patients for undergoing routine surgery, and the triaging was done for these surgical patients as emergency, semi-emergency, and elective, which means they had to come with a negative COVID report before they embarked on doing a surgery. Only emergencies were handled without the report. So this became a new normal, and this was an important. So it redefined the whole surgical practice, and there was more information surgeons were seeking out with regards to protocols that should define their surgical practices, and there was more communication that was happening between surgeons and the physician groups as to determine who should be subjected for surgery. And obviously surgeons were reading more about this disease or about the medical part of it to understand the newer protocols that were being rolled out, which is again a new thing. So as I said, this whole screening process for surgery, which otherwise included serology and other tests, was redefined for them to have undergoing PCR test or antibody test for COVID. And if these tests were not readily available, even they were subjected to routine CT scans to look for any chest lesions, to identify the patients with possible COVID and exclude them from their routine surgery. So these are all something new that we learned. And to that effect, there was a beautiful narrative that came in NEJM. Uh, so if you look at this picture, the NEJM talks about Noah's Ark, or we call it as Matsya Avatar, when there is a passing of a new age, where a select people have to be picked up to move on to the new age. So this NEJM article talks about 5 specialities which would be picked up to pass on to the new stage, and these specialties were our intensivists, who are the frontline workers in saving lives in COVID, ER physicians, pulmonologists, physicians, and family physicians. So these are the 5 specialties which got their due credit and emphasis during COVID because they formed the front line of tackling the COVID. So again, because I gave this talk on a physician's day, I think the whole India has to salute every healthcare workers and every physicians who have shown this remarkable grit in influencing great outcome for our country, and shown to the world how we can battle this pandemic very effectively. So again, salutations to all the physicians and all the healthcare workers who are at the forefront of battling the pandemic, and they became the headline actors during the COVID. And COVID, what it did was it provided an opportunity amidst all the risks, because this is a unique situation which healthcare personnel had never faced, where you are treating a patient but you yourself are at an increased risk of contracting the disease and being more affected. So amidst the risk, they valued the opportunity that was there, and they could measure and reflect upon the utility and value of the services. After the medical specialties, OBG and pediatrics were more involved, and epidemiologists and virologists took the center stage, otherwise who were not very much talked about or who did not come into the limelight. So they became the voice in the media in this pandemic, and that was a very new thing that happened. And obviously, the surgical specialties had an undignified fall from favor because historically, surgeons had a very coveted space in the healthcare. But this pandemic really shown that it was the physician group which had a big say, and they became the frontline people in tackling this pandemic. And surgical specialties definitely took a backseat. So the lesson 6, what we learned was survival of the fittest, because what this COVID showed was the brunt it took was on elderly and vulnerable patients, and it had a huge impact on mental health. So the older patients became very vulnerable to this disease, and that was very glaring in this pandemic. And they were very vulnerable to depression, delirium, and malnutrition. And the elderly population, they missed out on the whole psychosocial support. There was a disruption of their ongoing medical conditions. Care for their ongoing medical conditions was disrupted, their social activities were disrupted, and their social well-being and elderly people spending time with their friends, all these were severely affected in COVID. So basically, the vulnerable patients took a major hit in this COVID. and the mental health and well-being of doctors was significantly affected, and they took the brunt in a very quiet way. And this is something one has to pay attention to, because there was increased amount of stress and there was increased amount of anxiety, and generally the healthcare personnel felt very lonely during this whole COVID, because they took the brunt, especially the physician groups. They took the brunt and they were the front line, and they felt very lonely, with possibly some lack of support in the initially, by maybe other peers. And there was a sense of social isolation also in them, and there was a feeling of hopelessness. And most importantly, I've spoken to many of my doctor colleagues, my trainees. Insomnia is something that was troubling for them during the COVID time, and some of them did develop post-traumatic stress disorder. And with regards to economic impact, I'm sure the GDP of India has taken a huge hit. As you see, there is a big blip here, and it is only foreseen to improve back to its baseline maybe in 2022 and later on. So that is the sort of economic brunt that it took. So last couple of slide is on lesson 7. So lesson 7 is the risk for healthcare workers and increased deaths among healthcare workers that was witnessed during COVID-19. And this is the deaths in healthcare workers, global statistics. If you see, Mexico has the highest number of deaths, 1320, and followed by USA, followed by UK. So in that, India seems to have done a little better than USA, UK, Brazil also. It is at a sixth position at 573. So what is important to note is the specialty wise deaths. If you see again, your physicians and general practitioners were the major hit, followed by acute care physicians, and followed by other physicians. This is an Indian publication that showed the number of deaths. But what is interesting for the listeners to note is this. So the death rates amongst the normal population, if it is non-doctors, if it is 0.3%, amongst the doctors it was put at 15.3%. And as of 10th September, if you see this media print that came, 1 in 3 dogs falling to COVID. As of 10th September, the case fatality rate amongst the doctor community was 16.7%, and when compared to general population it was 1.7%, which means to say doctors as it is, they are very vulnerable to a lot of mental health conditions. They are at a risk of contracting the disease, and when they contract, this statistic is even more staggering and alarming, that the risk of death also is much higher in doctors, 16.7. And in practicing doctors, if you see, who are actively in the forefront, the risk of mortality was 36.4%, which is an extremely worrying trend. And this is an important sort of a lesson we learned, that doctors were increasingly vulnerable to the morbidity and mortality of this dreaded COVID. So the conclusions I would make is, the new normal that has been created should not be left to the fate, and it is the choices that healthcare personnel or healthcare workers make during this pandemic to see how best they can circumvent this. And this is an important message that I would want every listener to bear in mind, that what this COVID saw was science and facts were put at the highest pedestal, and they should be the center stage which should influence the key decisions in tackling such dreaded pandemics in any state or any country. So the science and fact are the ones that should influence the key policy making, the key decision making with regards to how we care for these patients, and that should be looked at as a resource. And that is the biggest lesson every listener should bear in mind, that we should only look towards science to vanquish and conquer such future pandemics. And our behavior during these pandemics also should be influenced by the science and the facts that we collate and we deliberate upon. And there was an increased sense of solidarity during this whole pandemic, and there is a renewed emphasis on the need for compassion, empathy, and loving care for our colleagues and for the patients that we look after. And the whole world took a little break from the materialistic pursuits. That was something new, which possibly lessened the stress of achieving these materialistic pursuits. So there was a break from obsessive focus and near-term gratification, and hopefully these lessons would prepare the world better for any future threats, and hopefully this should enable the world for fair and compassionate redistribution of wealth and security and opportunity to all. So these are the lessons that we could learn. So thank you very much. So You can visit my website to rehear to this lecture, www.drpradeeprangappa.com. Thank you all.